right. Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. I know it's been a couple weeks since I've seen you. It's just been that time of year where there's a lot of travel, and I have quite a bit more coming up on the weekends. But when I'm around on Sundays, I do want to bring you a workshop every single Sunday if we can, so that you can continue to move your goals and your retirement life forward, move the ball down the field, and create your dream life when it comes to making this transition to the next stage. So we're back today, so hopefully you can catch this one sometime this week if you're not here watching live. But what I really wanted to get back to today is speaking about a lot of the basics, because I think sometimes we can get down the rabbit hole of all these fancy things when it comes to advanced retirement planning, and we talk about that quite a bit here, around investments, taxes, distributions, and those type of things. But I think what I've been seeing lately is that there's just a bunch of people, a big group of people that are just waking up now to retirement coming because of the current challenging times that we're having. With COVID, I've seen a lot more people getting more offers to retire early, these buyout packages, and potentially leaving work or transitioning to the next stage of life a lot earlier than they were probably expecting. Some for financial reasons, some because their companies are trying to downsize, and some because they've realized that life might be a whole lot shorter than we kind of imagine sometimes. With things like this COVID that have come and just hit our country very hard, we're seeing a lot more people waking up to saying, hey, maybe I don't want to just live my life to work, and maybe I should be thinking about retiring maybe 6 months, a year, or even a couple years earlier than I was expecting, because sometimes we just don't always know exactly what we're going to be facing. So I wanted to really just kind of go back to the basics today. We're going to talk about some things that are helping you set your foundation. And so I'm calling this series that we're going to be going through here called the How to Retire series. And it's really going to be around the basics of getting started with retirement planning, some of the principles and some of the action items that you're going to need to do and have in place so that you can retire with confidence. And so we're going to get into some of that today. Before we jump in, I want to introduce myself. My name is Jason Hamilton. I'm a certified financial planner, and I'm the founder of Keep It Simple Financial Planning. We're a fee-only registered investment advisor located in Southern California, but we do serve clients nationwide. So if you are interested in getting some help with your retirement planning or your investments, really anything around this transition to the next stage, we can help you out with that. But what we'd like to do is bring these workshops to help you get better at what you're doing, increase your knowledge, and really build your confidence, right? I think that's what it all goes back to for me, is that, I had a client that I was speaking with this weekend, or actually maybe Friday, and it was really wonderful what she said. And the one thing she said was, Jason, finances were never really my thing, and I really appreciate the way you've been able to work with us and help us make things, simple and in a way that I can understand them, right? And so the name of my firm is Keep It Simple Financial Planning, and there are definitely technical or complicated issues that we have to deal with sometimes, especially around things like taxes. But I think at the end of the day, if we can make those things simple and help you understand them in a way that just makes sense to you, regardless of you not having to have all the knowledge, but at least if you understand what's going on, and you can feel comfortable with that, I think that's considered a win for me. So today I want to go back to just some real basics. We're going to start sort of at the beginning here, and then we'll work through weekly to help you kind of build your plan and build your knowledge. And there's probably going to be some things we talk about you might not be comfortable with, and we're always here. We're always here if you want to reach out and talk about that. But ideally, there are some things here that I think you can spend some time on and start to get your financial life in order, and to start, developing that sense of confidence and the sense of peace, because you're making progress. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So it's going to be a relatively short presentation, but I am going to have some homework for you and an activity for you to do once we wrap up today. So hopefully you can get those done before our next meeting, and then you'll be ready to talk about what we're going to talk about next. So let's jump right in. And I should mention as well, we always try to make time for questions at the end. So if there's questions you have along the way, go ahead and drop those down in the chat or in the comment section there, and I'll do my best to get to those along the way and monitor those as we're going through. So let's jump in here, okay? Let's switch over here to my other share screen. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is, starting with how to retire. And I'm calling this one Living with Financial Integrity. It's kind of, may sound like kind of an odd term or something you might not have thought of on the way to, getting your finances in order. But when we talk about financial integrity, it really comes down to, handling our finances in a way that aligns with, the way our values, what we believe we should be doing, to correctly keep everything in order. And what I've found is just a lot of people just kind of go day to day with the busyness of our lives and never really take the time to get their finances in order. So that's what we're going to start talking about today. So let's jump in. Before we do, I do have to let you know that nothing I'm going to speak about today should be considered, financial advice, investment advice, tax advice, legal advice, anything like that. This is for educational purposes, but hopefully you find some value in it, okay? All right, so let's talk about what is financial integrity. When I start with financial integrity, I want to take a step back and let's talk about integrity, in itself. So when you go to dictionary.com, they define integrity as the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles or moral uprightness, right? And so this is how I look at how I want you to be managing your finances. I want you to manage them with integrity. So, right? So being honest, really taking a good account of what your current financial status is. And, I know this is one of those things that we can sometimes get the ostrich syndrome and just want to bury our heads in the sand over and not want to deal with. But, if you're going to plan for this next step here, which is retirement, you're going to have to be very honest with yourself, and you're really going to have to deal with some things that you may have not wanted to look at for a while. So, we're going to help you do that. So if we take this concept of being honest and having strong moral principles and apply it to our finances, so we can consider financial integrity to imply that our daily financial actions are in alignment with our internal values and our predetermined financial plans, right? And if you know me at all, my biggest thing is that I want you to have a financial plan. A lot of folks will come to us for things like help with investments or whatever it may be. But if you've worked with us before, you'll know that I'm going to say, hey, first thing we need to do is get your financial plan in order. And then once we understand what your financial plan should be, then we can use your investments and your finances and your wealth as a tool to help you live out your financial plan and your values and the things that are most important to you. So this is where we're going to get started today is creating the foundation for this. Another way to say this is if our external actions with our finances align with our internal values, then we are living in financial integrity, okay? So if you know that you should be keeping track of your expenses, if you know that you should be keeping track of your investments and, rebalancing your accounts on a regular basis, reviewing your portfolio on a regular basis and making decisions on what funds to keep, maybe what funds you want to get rid of. These are things that are all part of the management of your finances. So if you're doing these things consistently, great, then there's a good chance you're living in a solid financial integrity. But if you're not keeping track of your expenses, if you don't know how much it's going to take you to live once you retire, then these are some things you might want to start really getting a pen and paper out and writing down today so that you can have some things to put into place once we get wrapped up with our session. So unfortunately, financial integrity is just not a common American characteristic. One thing I do love about folks that come from other countries, immigrants, is that the majority of immigrants are just very good at handling finances from what I've seen. There's certain populations that are just so good at saving. I think the Chinese culture, it's something like their average savings rate is like 25%. That's, average. So if you go to all of China and you took the over 1 billion people there and you averaged out the amount of money everybody's saving from their income each month, it's about 25%. So can you imagine if we did this in America and we all saved an average of 25% of our finances? And I know we can sometimes make excuses that, there's just no way to save 25%, but there's always ways to make decisions, right? So can you live in a lower cost area? Can you have a less expensive house, a lower cost apartment, or a lower cost, lifestyle? So there are almost always ways we can find to get our finances more aligned with integrity. But again, these are just things culturally that I think some other cultures do better than we do. But the thing is that financial principles are a universal concept, right? You're not going to get ahead with your finances if you're spending more than you make, right? You have to spend less than you make, save a little bit every single month or week or whatever it may be, however you get paid, and you put that away for the long term. And you start with certain things like saving an emergency fund, and then you can start to save it for your retirement later down the road. And ideally, by the time you've gotten to your late 50s or early 60s, you have money saved aside, you have a nest egg put aside, and you've done things like maybe purchase a house and pay down your mortgage. These are all things that, it really does take time. And the earlier you start, the better. But again, these are just not things we're generally very good at. So, like I said, it's not a common American characteristic. In our country, only about 32% of households maintain a budget, right? Only about 32% of households track their expenses and keep track of what's coming in and what's going out. So that's 1 in 3 people, right? So, there might seem sometimes that people around you are doing a whole lot better job with their finances. But when you actually look at the numbers, probably about 1 in 3 of those people are. So if you're the one that does this, then you can bet yourself that 2 of your other friends do not do this. Only 22% of people between ages 55 to 64 have a written financial plan, right? So this is what I was talking about a moment ago. Our firm is called Keep It Simple Financial Planning. Our foundation for everything we do is helping you create a financial plan. And then from there, there's other things that we can do, like implement investment strategies, implement tax strategies, implement insurance strategies. But we need to have a financial game plan so that we know what our roadmap is, and then we can utilize our resources as a tool to best help you live the life of, that aligns with your values and your financial integrity. So if 1 in 5 people have a written financial plan and 1 in 3 households maintain a budget, it's pretty obvious why we're in the financial situation we are. And with this current crisis we're facing, which, by the way, I don't think we've seen anything yet, okay? We are still living off, government loans for some of the businesses. We're living off unemployment for a big chunk of people. In my state of California, which please don't judge me because I live in California, okay? I definitely don't think like a lot of folks here. But 27% of the unemployment claims are in California, of all the unemployment claims in the United States, and we only have 12% of the population, okay? So we have a much higher than average percentage of unemployment claims. So this is very scary, right? So as a financial advisor in the state of California, I'm really watching what's going to be going on around me because I'm very concerned, I'm very concerned. We do have a higher population of folks that are in the services and entertainment industry. So think about things like hotels, restaurants, theme parks, things like that. We have a very high percentage. Our population overall, like I said, is 12%. We have about 14% of our population that is in these service industries. So with so many of our restaurants and small businesses been shut down, and even still to this point, only allowing things like outdoor dining, we are still seeing a lot of folks that are on unemployment. We also have a lot of people that do things like, massages, haircuts, I don't know, other service industries like that, that aren't open yet. So these are things that, if you don't have a financial plan, if you're not maintaining a budget, then there's a good chance you weren't ready for this, and you weren't ready for this tragedy that struck us. And we're about 6 months in since 15 days to slow the spread, and we're still not opened up all the way around the country. So, without a financial plan and without maintaining a budget, it's going to be, really hard for you to make sure that you're going to be on track for not only for a crisis like this, but whatever may come next, which is something we don't know what that could be. But the one thing I do know is 100% of people planning for retirement need to know when they can retire and how to do it, right? So this is not something that is really an option. I mean, if you want to wing it and kind of, throw things against the wall and see what sticks for your retirement, that's fine. But I personally think that you should have a detailed game plan on what you should be doing step by step, how much you can spend, what things like your net worth are, what your financial ratios are, which we're going to talk about here, and having a really good foundation and a grip on your finances. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit more to this. But this is what I'm saying. With 1 in 5 people having a financial plan, 1 in 3 maintaining a budget, it's pretty obvious here why we're facing a retirement crisis right now. The average household savings and retirement accounts is just over $100,000. And for those of you that are planning for retirement, I'm sure that there's plenty of people that have less than this, but a lot of people do have more, by the way. And a lot of people I speak to that might even have $1 million are still feeling stressed out about if they can, actually retire comfortably, right? So we are having a huge crisis in this country, and a big example of this is the passion and the the determination people have when it comes to government-sponsored programs like Social Security. There's been talk that with our Social Security program, the way it is, potentially running out by 2034, and if we don't make any changes, having to face a 20% or more cut to maintain the solvency of Social Security. I personally don't think Social Security is going to go to zero or anything like that, but with how reliant we are on as a country on Social Security, that to me is a retirement crisis. Most young people I know today, when they're planning for retirement, they're not looking at using Social Security as something that's going to be there for them. I do think it will be for them, but they're creating their financial plans so that they don't have to rely on Social Security. And, if we would have done this 40, 50 years ago, that might have been, we might have had a lot better position. But, currently we are facing quite a big crisis, and there's a lot of people that rely solely on Social Security. So if we were to cut that even 10 or 15%, let alone 20% or more, we'd have a lot of problems, and a lot of people may not be able to pay their bills or feed themselves appropriately. So, financial literacy and financial capabilities are something I'm so passionate about, which is why I do this. So I hope that you take what I'm talking about today and put it into practice so that you're not one of these folks that is feeling this stressed out when it comes time to make the transition. Okay? All right. So living with financial integrity when planning for retirement is about much more than just keeping a budget. Okay, keeping a budget is something that is important. Okay, you really should know what your expenses are and what you're spending now, and what you are going to need going into retirement. The majority of people have not taken the time to even figure any of this stuff out. So again, this is where we're starting today, but it's more than about keeping a budget. Financial integrity is having a plan for each of these items here that I'm going to be listing out, okay? And there's probably a little bit more to this, but these are at least the basic items. So like we mentioned here, your living expenses before and after retirement. You should have a very clear picture within a couple $100s per month of how much you need to sustain your lifestyle if you were to transition over to retirement and have to live on your resources, right? So between your Social Security, your pensions, and your retirement savings, you want to have a clear understanding of what you're going to need to draw, which pension option you should take, for example, to make sure you can hit your retirement income goal, and then also when you're going to claim Social Security. I know there's a lot of people that want to claim right at 62 for Social Security, but that's generally not recommended for most people. The general recommendation is to wait until at least full retirement age and, maybe beyond that, depending on your overall situation. That is not always a possibility for people because there's things like, health and other circumstances that don't allow us to go anywhere beyond 62. And even right now with what we're dealing with this employment crisis, 62 might be the age where a lot of people are going to have to pull. But these are things that if you start with really understanding your living expenses before and after retirement, it's the first step to getting a good comprehension of when you should be activating these other sources of potential retirement income you might have. All right, and then the next thing is making sure you don't run out of money late in retirement. There's a lot of things that could come up between now and the next 25 to 30 years once you retire. But if you can really lay out a plan and understand clearly what your expenses are going to be, and then from there, what your fixed income sources can handle and cover as a minimum, and then a reasonable withdrawal rate on any of your retirement savings, this is the foundation, again, of helping you create this retirement plan so that you can have a good plan to make sure that you're going to be covered all the way into those later years of retirement. And understanding, folks, that longevity today is not the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago. With these new developments in the area of health, and artificial intelligence that's helping us understand a lot more things around the human body and our genes, and being able to, within a few years, create specific drugs that are designed just for you to address one personal issue that you have in your body. We're going to be seeing a lot more longevity come up. A couple years ago, I was at a retirement conference, and a lot of times when you go to these conferences, yes, there is technical data around planning for retirement and what's changing, but they'll also have health professionals come in. And there's a gentleman there who was a doctor that was explaining to us what we should be expecting going forward the next 15, 20, and 30 years for folks that are planning for retirement. And a big thing that he will emphasize over anything else is the medical advances that are coming. If you didn't know, they're already doing things like there's a process called 3D printing where they can take cells from your body and they can grow those cells and then end up creating organs so that you can replace your own organs. They've even recreated hearts at this point. I don't think the hearts are fully implemented, but they're doing things like new ears, new livers, kidneys, things like that. So a lot of folks that have failing arteries or failing organs are going to be able to replace those with their own actual cells, So there's a much lower chance of the body rejecting those versus having a transplant. So the whole point of saying this is we should be expecting to live a lot longer than what we're seeing as our averages right now. You might have seen, average age of death being 76, and you see these things, work, 65 years so that you can live for 10 after retirement because most people retire at 65. But the reality is if you make it to 65 and you're married, there's a 51% chance that one of the spouses is going to make it to 91 or beyond. The average age for men and women that live till into their 60s is about 84, 85 for men and 86, 87 for women. But that's the average, which means 50% of people are going to live beyond those ages, okay? So I really want to make sure you have a plan for the back end of retirement to make sure you don't run out of money when you're still healthy and you're sitting there at 92 and, you don't want to run out of your nest egg then. So you want to make sure you have a plan for that. And then on the other end of this is the beginning years of retirement when you're the most healthy generally and you have the ability to be the most active. Maximizing your active years early in retirement is so important. And what I find is people that don't have a plan don't really understand how much they can spend. And so they'll really hesitate and they'll kind of be fearful of spending a little bit extra money in the early years because they're not really sure how much they can spend. And what happens sometimes is, health can change very quickly. Look at what we've been dealing with COVID. It's just happened so fast that I think a lot of people are waking up to like, wow, I could really get sick and just out of nowhere and be a lot sicker than I expected. And maybe I won't get to actually live out all of my retirement goals. So, finding living in financial integrity and having a plan is finding that balance between having a game plan for really active, enjoying these active years in the early years of retirement, while balancing, making sure that if you or your spouse lives to 90 or 95 or even beyond that. By the way, I have a client whose mom is 103 and she still drives to the store every other week to go get her groceries and back. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but according to her, she seems to do fine and she maintains her license and she's doing just fine and she's 103 years old. That might not be common, but the doctors were saying that we could be expecting people commonly in the next 20 years to be living to 110 or even 120 years old. So these are things that I want you to be thoughtful of and I want you to be aware of so that you don't run out of money at 76 because you thought you were going to die and end up having 10 or 20 more years that you need to fund, okay? While also maximizing the early years. So all very important stuff here. So the other big thing is this is a big stress factor for a lot of people, covering healthcare, right? There's been some announcements this week that there might be some new healthcare plans coming. I'm waiting to see what happens. If they're going to get rid of Obamacare or not. That's a huge contested issue. Excuse me. There's a huge contested issue about getting rid of the ACA plans where the ACA plans, or also known as Obamacare, they have no pre-existing requirements. And if you're lower on the income scale, then actually it's pretty reasonable and pretty affordable. But once you get past about $49,000 of adjusted gross income for a single person, or after about $67,640 for a couple, excuse me, then these plans can go from anywhere from $400 or $500 a month up to $1,600 a month, or maybe even more. I have somebody that mentioned, I think it was a couple weeks ago, they spent about $3,000 or $4,000 a month on healthcare because they just have a lot of things going on. But the average I see is somewhere between $1,600 to $2,000 a month for a couple. That has, kind of a moderate, medium level silver care plan to cover their health care. So that's quite out of the budget for most people. And there's people that literally would love to retire, could retire maybe 60 or 61 or 62. But if you add on the cost of an additional $16,000 or $20,000 for health care until they hit Medicare age of 65, it just makes it basically, impossible and really kind of blows up their plan. So having a plan for covering health care, early on and along the way, but also long-term care, which is almost nobody wants to think about this, but there's a 55% chance if you're married, you or your spouse are going to have some sort of paid long-term care assistance. So long-term care facilities or in-home assistance are generally required when you can no longer do any two or more of any of the ADLs, or also known as activities of daily living. So if you can't get yourself to the store, dress yourself, get your own medicines, feed yourself, clean your house, these are things that are just the normal activities of life that if you can't do those, you may need somebody to come in and, to start generally 30 hours a week or so to help you out. And then maybe at some point advancing to a live-in facility. You want to make sure that you have funds set aside to cover these. Medicaid can be one option where you let the government take care of you. But ideally, I would like for you to have your options, whether you bring someone in your home to care for yourself so that you can be independent for as long as possible. But these are things you want to make sure you have a game plan for, okay? Another part of this is managing investment growth and distributions. When it comes to funding your retirement, a majority of people are going to be using their investments to help cover some of the income need. Most people don't live only on Social Security or pensions. Most people need a little bit of draw from their investments. So, a good place to start is figuring out what the minimum need you're going to need to draw is. So maybe it's 3 or 4% per year. And then from there, looking and evaluating on an annual basis at a minimum, how are your accounts doing? Are your accounts returning higher than what you expected? Or are they returning lower than expected? And then on top of that, bringing in the count of inflation. Has inflation increased this year, or did it stay flat? And if inflation is increasing, then obviously increasing your draw from your accounts based on inflation is something you want to be making sure that you can do comfortably, and that, again, it's not going to cause you problems on the back end of retirement and running out there. So managing that investment growth. And then the distributions are, one, the amount you distribute, but two is, what account are you going to distribute from? Are you going to take from your brokerage account that's non-retirement? Are you going to take from your pre-tax account like your IRA, 403b, TSPs, 401ks? Or are you going to take from your account like your Roth IRA that might be a tax-free account, or maybe annuities if you have annuities? So, creating a distribution plan is something else that you want to have a plan for. So these are things that you just don't really have to deal with prior to retirement. But living in financial integrity is really checking these things off your list and making sure you have a game plan so that you stay on track over time. And then this is another one, keeping your taxes as low as possible. We're looking at right now in the political world of two really different ways to view taxes. The Republican side wants to keep taxes low and maybe even get rid of things like employment taxes, which stresses everybody out because employment taxes fund your Social Security and Medicare. And then there's the other side of the table where we want to get rid of the lower taxes we gained in the 2016 tax plan and then add wealth taxes for people that are higher income. And so there's other things there on more on the Democratic side. So, regardless, there's always going to be tax changes over the course of a 25 or 30 year retirement. And it's not always going to be one side of the aisle or the other. We're going to have to have flexibility. But managing your taxes and trying to plan ahead with all the available information you have to keep your taxes as low as possible is what I really want you to focus on, because as lower your taxes are, the more money you get to keep, the more money you get to use for your lifestyle. And that's what our ultimate goal is really maximizing your situation and your lifestyle regardless of your asset level. Okay. All right. And then some other things to think about are making sure your legacy goals happen as you wish. So if you want to leave, inheritances behind to children, grandchildren, or to charities, or if you just want to spend everything, there's two sides of the equation. There is making sure you can spend as much as possible while having enough for just something like long-term care. Or making sure that your legacy is protected. And if you have accounts that have big balances in pre-tax accounts like IRAs and 401ks, being aware of some of the new regulations and some of the new laws and things that have passed, like the Secure Act recently, which has now pre-tax accounts, or really all IRA accounts, when they get passed on to a non-spouse beneficiary, the beneficiary, unless there's an exemption, they'll all have to be drained within 10 years or less. So if you're passing on a $1 million or $2 million IRA because you don't use all your funds, and that goes to a child who might be in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, and they're earning, some of their highest earning income years they've ever experienced, you could be giving away, 30, 40, or 50% or more of that account to taxes if you don't plan accordingly, right? So you want to have a game plan to make sure your legacy goals are happening as you wish them to happen, okay? And then, as we mentioned, keeping up with ongoing regulations. Look at this year alone. If you were having to take our required minimum distributions, also known as RMDs, you're able to put that back in your account this year. You didn't have to take that. So that could potentially lower your taxable income if you didn't need that distribution this year. Like I mentioned before, we have the Secure Act. That's changed a lot of things, like being able to take more out of your 401k account and then pay taxes over, the next 3 years, for example. You can... you're going to be required, like I said, to distribute your accounts within 10 years after death. There's a lot of little things that are continuing to come up. So you want to make sure you have a game plan to keep up on ongoing regulations. And this is one of the benefits of establishing a relationship with a good financial advisor, because if you have somebody that's helping you stay on track with this stuff, it's going to really take a lot of stress out of your life. And if you're a financial advisor, if all they're worrying about for you, and if all they're doing for you is investments, then I really think you should be looking at more of a comprehensive type of advisor. So a certified financial planner is a good place to start for somebody that can help you encompass the whole of your financial situation. So keeping up with ongoing regulations, keeping up with ongoing tax changes, and potential benefits and ways to help you save and keep your finances on track throughout retirement. Again, these are all things that are part of financial integrity. So if you don't have a plan for these items, then creating a plan to realign with financial integrity should be at the top of your list. Okay, so we're going to talk about really where to get started here. Okay, so where to start. There's 2 activities that I want you to start with, and we're kind of wrapping up here towards the end of our workshop. So give me just a few minutes here to lay this out. But if you want to get a pen and paper to write these things down, I would definitely recommend you do so. And then you're going to spend some time probably on Google figuring out how to do these things. But if you want some help with it, we can talk about getting you some help with that too. But I want you to do 2 things for me this week, okay? I want you to do 2 things, really not for me, okay? These are for yourself. I want you to do 2 things for yourself to help you establish and get a good game plan in place to start getting your plan for financial integrity and really your retirement game plan in place. So the first thing is creating a balance sheet, okay? And also a statement of cash flows, okay? If you don't know what these are, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. And then we're also going to talk about getting your financial ratios in order if you are carrying debt and things like that. Okay, so your balance sheet. So your balance sheet is basically also known as your net worth statement or your statement of financial position. Those are all kind of interchangeable terms. But what you're going to do is create a list of all your assets and all your liabilities. Okay, so everything you own and everything you owe. All right, and once you get that created, you'll get that all organized. So you can, again, this is something you might want to Google. I have my preferred way of doing it, but you might have your preferred way of doing it. And create a list of all your assets and liabilities and get everything organized so that your whole financial life is all on one page. That's where I'd recommend that you start. And then the next thing is to get your cash flow statement. Okay, and what this is really going to be a list of your expenses and your money going in and your money going out. So if you can print out, if you want to take this, to a hardcore level, this is what I recommend, is print out your last 12 months of bank and credit card statements and categorize all your expenses, right? Categorize where all your income came from and categorize where all your expenses went to. So you really want to get as detailed as possible and really break this down. And I've talked about this before, but 2 general categories to start with are your fixed expenses and then your variable expenses. Fixed expenses are going to be things like, insurance, mortgages, things like that are very consistent. And then variable expenses are how much did you spend on going out? How much did you spend on vacations? How much did you spend on, just weekly groceries and things like that? Pets, all those type of things. Medical expenses. Get all of that really organized and get all that mapped out. And, just take the time to do this. If you don't have time to go through 12 months, at least go through the last 90 days. Start with 90 days and maybe work your way back. But if you want to get a good, clear picture of your cash flow and what it's really going to take for you to retire and have enough, and what your expenses are, you might want to go back a little bit further in this plan. Okay. And then once you get these items in order, then I'm going to recommend that you create and determine your financial status and your ratios. Okay. Your financial status and your financial ratios. So once you have your net worth statement, then that's going to allow you to create your net worth. So your net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. So you take everything you owe, everything you own, and you subtract everything you owe, and then the number that's left over is your net worth. Okay, and that's the big number that you want to start with. So when people say, I'm a millionaire, they take everything they own, including their homes and their retirement accounts and everything like that, and they subtract off everything they owe, so their mortgages, credit card payments, and maybe car loans if they own a car. And then the net number from those two numbers is going to be your net worth. Okay, so I'd like you to establish your net worth and figure out exactly how much you're worth currently right now. I shouldn't say how much you're worth. You're worth an unlimited amount, but how much your financial worth is. Okay, assets minus liabilities. And then if you have debt, then I would like you to go through and figure out some of these debt to income ratios. Okay, so if you have debt that you're dealing with and you're looking to pay off, then you're going to start here with your consumer debt ratio. Okay, consumer debt are things like cars and credit card payments, right? And I put some percentages in here that I just think are numbers you want to stay below. These are kind of general guidelines and recommendations. But if your consumer debt ratio is above 15%, you really want to make sure you might want to take a look at your expenses, maybe think about getting a different car, whatever it may be. But your total consumer debt ratio should not be more than 15%. If it's over 15%, then your financial status and your financial ratios are going to be a little bit out of whack. Ideally, it's at 0%, right? I would like you to have 0%, or at least be paying off your credit cards every single month, especially before retirement. If you can be debt-free, then that's a really wonderful place to be. Many people are not going into retirement debt-free, so that's okay. But we want to have a plan to make sure we're going to be efficiently paying these items off in the best way possible, right? And then the next ratio is going to be your front-end debt, okay? So this is if you still have a house payment. So your housing ratio should not be more than 28% of your gross income, right? So if you take your housing payment and divide that by your gross income, so the amount you make from work before taxes, you don't want that to be over 28%. That's considered a prudent, financial ratio for your front-end debt. And then if you add up your total debt, so your credit card payments, your cars, and your housing, and you divide that by your monthly income, that's going to give you your back-end ratio. Okay, so that's called your back-end ratio. So we do not want that to be over 36%. That's very difficult to do where I'm from in California. Most people's house payments are somewhere between 30 to 40%, with a huge, I think the average here where I'm at in Orange County is about 50% is housing. So that's not good, and this will really limit people's ability to save and plan for the future. But, sometimes you just have to live in somewhere in a neighborhood you might not want to live in so that you can have the proper financial ratios, because if you don't, you're going to have some trouble long-term meeting your financial goals, okay? And then the last thing here under debt to income is your credit utilization ratio, and that's going to be your balances on your cards divided by available credit, okay? So you want to keep a ratio of 30% or less. I mean, I really like to keep it down at 20% or less, but to keep your credit score high and positive, as long as you're about 30% or less, that will keep your credit score, relatively good. So again, you want to keep those things at 0 ideally, but these are just setting a baseline standard. So once you get all your financial ratios in place, that we can figure out what's out of whack. If your consumer debt is too high, well, then I know we need to start with that first and really start looking at getting your consumer spending down so that we can get your financial ratios in order and, again, help you get prepared for retirement. So a question here is, should we use gross or net income? That is going to be gross income, okay? If you can do net income, that's great, but I think that's going to be really hard to do for most people. So gross income is what these numbers are relating to, okay? And then Daryl asked for what percentage of your home value should be used. I've heard 80%. No, why would you use 80%? You would use 100% of the home value, right? So you would use 100% of your home value to determine your net worth. The only thing I've heard of with 80% of home value is how much property insurance you should maintain. But no, when you're doing your net worth calculation, you want to use your 100% of your home value with that, Daryl, okay? All right, so once we get our net worth statement, get our debt to income ratio in place, but once we get everything organized, then we want to look at our liquidity ratio, okay? So this is something like you can consider maybe your emergency fund or something like that. But liquidity ratio is all liquid assets divided by monthly expenses, okay? So this, I would exclude retirement accounts from this for this particular calculation. I would just include things that are highly liquid. So you can include savings accounts, checking accounts, maybe brokerage accounts. If it's all in stock, I don't know. That's kind of a questionable one. But start with your cash accounts and maybe CDs, things like that. Savings accounts, checking accounts, and CDs. And you want to add those up. And then you want to divide that number by your monthly expenses, okay? So let's say you have $2,500 in monthly expenses and you have $10,000 of cash saved. When you divide that together, that would give you a liquidity ratio of 4, and that would mean you have 4 months expenses, saved. So, your liquidity ratio is basically how many months of expenses you have saved in cash. So the ideal range is a little bit tricky. If you're pre-retirement, 3 to 6 months is good. 3 months would be for a couple that both has full-time jobs, because if one person loses their job, then we still have another income coming in. 6 months would be if there's only one income earner in the household. And I say up to 24 months because if you're getting really close to retirement, you might want to have up to 24 months of cash or cash equivalents there, so that your retirement income need is very conservative, so that you don't have to worry about markets going up and down in any short time frame. And so again, this is your liquidity ratio, somewhere between 3 to 24 is going to be the goal, depending on your scenario. So depending on where you're at when in relation to retirement is how you're going to square up your health there. Okay, so net worth, debt to income, get your your consumer debt, and your other credit ratios in order, and then get your liquidity ratio in place. Okay. So this is what I want you to do to get your to create and determine your financial status for this week, and get this ready. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do next Sunday, but if I can, then we'll talk about continuing on from this. If not, it'll be the following Sunday. But that gives you at least a week to get these in order. And if you want to follow along with this How to Retire series, then I think this will be really helpful and give you a really good foundation on getting things in order here. But it is going to take some work and some time on your behalf to do outside of your work hours between now and then. So, this is all about your commitment to yourself and your retirement and what your goals are. And if you're committed and you want to get your financial retirement items in order, then I'm going to guide you, but I can't do it for you. Okay. If you want some hand holding, then come join come work with our firm. We'll help you get all this stuff mapped out. We'll help you create a plan, and we'll do all the heavy lifting for you. But if you want to do this on your own, these are the things where you want to start. Okay. I think that's pretty much what I have for today. So I want to thank you today for coming to our workshop, or coming to my workshop and joining us. I'm going to take a few minutes here if there's any questions, and I'm also going to put on my website. If you have some things that you would like to discuss, or if you want to get some help with this stuff, I'm going to put this one here. Let's see. There we go. If you'd like to get some help with this, obviously there's a lot more than what we talked about today. We also need to talk about taxes and insurance planning, investments, and all those other type of fun things that are going to come with retirement. But, if you want to do this on your own, just follow along. We'll help you get things in order. But if you want some help, you can go to my website at keepitsimplefinancial.com/talk. We have multiple programs that can help you get your retirement planning in order, whether you want to get some help just to get everything in order as a one-time service, or if you want a coach and some services that can help you ongoing with your investments and all your other retirement planning needs that are going to come along with this, getting this right. So I'm going to put this up. Let's see if we have any sort of questions here, and if we do, then I will put those up. I'm not seeing any at this point, so if not, then we will wrap it up for today. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in and for watching, and I really appreciate you and your time and attention. And I want to say, have a great week. I appreciate you, and if you need anything else, feel free to reach out, okay? KeepItSimpleFinancial.com is my website. You can get in touch with me there. And you can also feel free to ask a question in this group, and there'll be lots of great feedback along the way, all right? Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.